Listen closely to this recording. And this one. And lastly, this one. Besides the obvious like tone and intonation, there's something else that makes violinists like these stand out among a sea of very good players. Let's talk about it. I'm Tobias Murphy, and this is Murphy Music Academy. One of the curses of playing violin is that the most basic things are the most difficult to master. An expressive and musical violinist is not uncommon in the least. A violinist that can play with great tone, rhythm, and intonation is. But among those violinists that have good tone, intonation, and rhythm, what sets apart those at the very top level, your Hadelicks, your Heifetzes, your Perlmans, is, as far as technique goes, articulation. Listen to the Chloe Chua bit again. You notice how there's absolutely no junk, for lack of a better term, between her notes. Sometimes when even a very good violinist plays, you can often hear little bits of scrub, little bits of noise in between some of the notes. But in her case, there's none of that. In contrast, listen to this recording of the Mendelssohn. Now that is an excellent performance, and it's by no means messy, but if you listen very closely, you can hear that it is not quite at that absolute level of cleanliness. And even if you couldn't hear it yet, whether you realize it or not, you felt it. Most even casual violin aficionados can tell who is a truly great player, even if they can't quite say why. Now the likelihood that you or I are going to get a level of articulation and cleanliness anywhere close to Hadelick or Chua is probably zero. But we can improve our playing greatly by learning to focus on the particulars of articulation, which is what I want to help you with in this video. First, let's go over the different types of articulation, and then how to practice each one. The most obvious is left-hand finger articulation, various types of bowing articulation, slurred string crossings, and lastly, shifting. First, let's talk about basic finger articulation. So what makes any note articulate is that whatever sound that note is supposed to have, it has it immediately. Violinists often don't realize that their tone isn't quite there at the beginning of every note. Often it's like there's a settling in period for the sound. Even if that settling in is of a very short duration, we're going to hear that as being less than articulate. So the finger motion is going to aid that by striking the string as directly as possible and lifting as directly and simply as possible. Yes, lifting. A lot of people really only think about how their finger goes down, but you have to think about how you lift the finger just as much. So how do we get this direct, simple motion? Well, first we have to make sure we understand the proper mechanics of finger action. If you haven't done so yet, you must graduate from thinking about putting the fingers down and squeezing the string with the muscles in the left hand. We all start that way, but once you get a good sense of the fingerboard, it's time to take a more ergonomic approach. There are actually two components of proper finger motion: the leveraging of the thumb and the weighted drop of the fingertip. So let's start with thumb leveraging. We're going to start by holding our violin like this. Now this is actually easier if you sit down, but I'm standing in this video, so if you so desire, you can do it this way too. So place your thumb right here on the pad of the thumb. There should be kind of an L shape to your hand. And what you're going to do is you're going to use kind of this almost like a hammer motion. Slap your fingers against the fingerboard. So just like a hammer, there should be a sense of momentum to the swing, right? We're not using our muscles to slap the fingers down. We really want to get this sense of throwing, of leveraging the fingers against the thumb. So make sure you're getting that when you're learning this technique. Next, you can practice this in playing position. Again, same feeling. Get that hammer swing full momentum. Remember, don't squeeze the string. You're just using that energy that comes from the leveraging of the thumb to really smack the fingers against the string with no real physical effort on your part. Now, that is the first component. The second component is learning how to have heavy, leaden fingertips. See, the fingers can all collapse with a lot of weight from the center of the hand. And if you do it just right, you can actually very easily get your fingertips to slap on your hand, again, with no effort of the musculature. So combining thumb leveraging with that heavy drop of the fingers is how we get the proper finger action for good articulation. Now, to practice this technique and incorporate it into your playing, there are no better exercises than those found in Ševčík Opuses 1 and 7. Starting with Ševčík Opus 1, you're going to find a variety of different finger patterns that are to be practiced slowly with this type of finger action. Make sure when you are practicing these exercises to exaggerate the dropping motion. And make sure that the finger is actually dropping to the string, much like we practiced in these hand alone exercises, and not just being moved by the muscles. Now, for the lifting of the finger, because I said that is just as important for good articulation, you want to make sure that the motion of the finger is just as direct as the motion going down, and that you are moving from the base knuckles. Ideally, also, you should feel a little bit of the string kind of sticking to your finger as you're lifting. This will aid in that clear articulation and give a much clearer start to the next note. If you really want to make some great progress in your playing, then I highly suggest you practice at least a half a page of Ševčík Opus 1 every day along with your scales. Now, the same goes for Opus 7, which is entirely trill exercises. Trill exercises used to be a much bigger part of standard violin pedagogy, not so much anymore, which is really a shame because they are so incredibly useful in developing left-hand technique beyond just the ornament of the trill. You see, in trill exercises, we get to practice the relationship between two fingers at a time. If you can get the trilled finger to drop in the same place every time, no matter the speed, not only are you going to be developing the trill technique, but also the articulation and intonation as well. Now, the problem with trill exercises is that they are mind-numbingly boring, which is probably why teachers don't give them to their students as much anymore. But if you make yourself practice at least as much as you can stomach each day, then I guarantee you will start to see some amazing things happen in your articulation. Next, let's talk articulation of the bow. Once again, what makes a note articulate is that whatever the sound is supposed to be, that sound starts immediately at the beginning of the note. A loud sound, soft sound. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, there can be no delay. So I'm not going to be talking about various articulation techniques like martelé, détaché, staccato, spiccato. What I'm going to be talking about is what can be applied to all of them. When it comes to bowing articulation, the most important thing that you can understand is the relationship of the hair and the rosin with it and the strings. What starts the sound is that a connection or a friction is made between the hair and the string, and then that is released. Now, there are many different types of connections you can make, and a good way to demonstrate this is with pizzicato. So for instance, I can grab the string like this, like this, and even like this. Each of the sounds that I just produced with my finger are very different from each other, but none of them would happen if I didn't have some kind of connection of my finger with the string. And the same is true of the bow. Now, the trick to developing good bow articulation is to understand how to make the bow hair catch the string without using a lot of pressure. So watch this. I'm going to catch the string like I would in any normal bow stroke, but I'm not going to add in any pressure, but I'm going to keep the string caught and not release any of the sound. You see, if I am able to control the friction of the hair to the string, then no matter what bow stroke I do, I can make the sound happen when I want. A soft sound, a loud sound, détaché, martelé. If you can control the catch of the string, you can control the articulation. So how do we get this level of control? Well, a lot of it is going to come down to experimentation, but the first place you want to start with is coller. So in French, coller means glue, and the coller stroke is generally a stroke done by the fingers, typically at the frog, where you're going to start by gluing the hair to the string and then to release the stroke. Now, I said this is generally practiced at the frog, but you can also practice this in the middle and the tip. You see, this is all about the fingers. Fingers decide if the bow is going to catch the string or if it's going to release it. Practicing coller is the beginning of understanding this. As you get a better understanding of the finger's role in bowing articulation, then the next great place to practice this is going to be Kreutzer number 2. I suggest using the Galamian edition so you can practice through all of the great variations that he added. For instance, beyond just the regular détaché, he also adds additional accents, which are only really going to work if you're able to immediately catch the string with your fingers while playing. Now, the last two aspects of articulation are not quite as prominent, but they're very important, so we need to talk about them. When you cross strings, particularly in a slur, you must develop a specific right arm motion that helps articulate the note on the new string. It's not an accent, but there needs to be a little something there that makes sure that note is clear. Also, the left hand must learn how to prepare both notes. For example, when practicing arpeggios slowly, you'll notice that I put down my second finger almost a split second right after I put down my fourth finger. This means that my bow is the only thing that has to worry about the articulation and clarity of those two notes. You practice this way slowly in your arpeggios or any section where this type of string crossing might come up. Then as you go faster, your fingers are going to learn to prepare themselves much more ahead of time without you thinking about it, which is going to result in much cleaner and clearer passage work. Lastly, let's talk about articulation in shifts. Now, I'm not going into shifting technique because that is its own video. But much like string crossing articulation, you need to make sure that your hand has a very clear and direct motion to the new position. So we want to make sure that our speed is not too fast, because otherwise we can get a jerky kind of shift, which doesn't really sound very good, but we also want to make sure we're not too slow. Instead, we want to find that happy medium where there's enough speed where the beginning of that note is very clear, but only enough speed so that it doesn't draw unnecessary attention to itself, and we have this kind of succession of jerky shifts. Anyway, focusing on these aspects of articulation and putting them into your daily practice is not going to make you a great violinist like Hadlick or Chua, but it will make you a much better violinist than you were yesterday. I've been Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, always here to remind you there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.